Freedom is not free. Discover what it takes. It's time to tap and move forward.
Hello and welcome to Tap and Move Forward. I'm your host, Lynn Shelley. Today's guest was a soldier and NCO in the Utah Army National Guard. He specialized in human intelligence collection and cryptologic language analysis with fluency in Mandarin Chinese. He has worked in a career as a corporate security officer. He has 3 college degrees, and he is one of the owners of a martial arts studio. With all of these demands, he is also a family man, and we were lucky to have his wife Anna present for the interview, who commented on some of the struggles of military life from a spouse's perspective. Here's the interview with Kyle Whiteley. Why did you join the military, and how old were you?
I was 29 when I joined the military. As far as why I joined, you have kind of the functional reasons and the personal reasons. Probably the personal reason, I kind of always felt a duty to at least contribute in some way. I thought about joining the military when I was a lot younger and hadn't done that, and started to look at it and said, now I have a family and such. And so some of the functional reasons combined, which was that I really was looking at how can I get to a college degree, and how can I use some of those benefits and also increase my resume and increase some of our funds at the time. I was working corporate security for the LDS Church. I was making pretty good money, but could use a little bit more and part-time work. And so it just seemed to fit all those, and started looking into it. There was a couple people at where I worked that had been in the Guard and just suggested to look into it, and kind of seemed like a fit. And so it all kind of came together, and we thought about it as a family, and we decided to enlist. So
inevitably there was a deep sense of fulfilling some sort of obligation or duty.
Yeah, I mean, the military the experience wasn't exactly what I thought it would be, but I'd always kind of had that sense that, no matter what you do in the military, you're part of what keeps the country free, essentially. If there's no credible, whether you actually go out there and you have to fight an enemy, or we're in some of the great wars that all of our ancestors, like all of my grandpa was in World War II, and most of my dad's side was, Marines, which, they razzed me about the fact I was just in the Army, of course, and there's always that back and forth. But it's just, that's everyone doing what they can is the reason we get to keep running our country the way we do. Even if you're just there and you're in a state of readiness, like in the National Guard, and you're a credible threat of the fact that more people could mobilize, and so it makes enemies. That's the reason we don't get invaded. They don't think to come and do that.
Did you pick what your job was before you joined?
Absolutely, yeah. As some people had told me, don't let the recruiters fool you. You can negotiate for what you want in your contract. And, at first they were like, I really wanted to learn Mandarin Chinese. I was going to college for that at the time, and was starting to sink into debt on that. And I was just like, I want to learn Mandarin Chinese and other, get some degrees going. And I was like, just debt did not seem like a good idea. And I was like, well, I can both kind of serve the country, and I could, functionally, the two kind of intersected, the functional reasons. And there are some great benefits that we got that way vocationally that you just can't get really any other way. I ended up by the time my contract was up, I had 2 associate's degrees, a high level of proficiency in Mandarin Chinese, and then I had a business degree, a bachelor's degree. So, and all that paid for with no debt, using just simple benefits that are available to all the service members. I didn't have to even get a GI Bill. I was just using federal tuition assistance combined with FAFSA, which those two can go together. Not a lot of people know that. And just kind of pacing myself. I started college a couple years before the military, but by just around the time my contract ended, I finished my last degree. And so I was able to do that. And you learn a lot in the military. You get a lot of professional experience. You get to run across a lot of things you'll never get to run across really any other way.
Did you find that you ran into some big surprises after joining the military, or was it relatively what you were expecting?
I don't know that, definitely surprises, for sure. And I don't know anyone that hasn't been surprised. I think maybe you come in with your eyes more or less open. It wasn't like a super, shock you to where you can't handle it surprise, but, they say you're going to lose some of your freedom joining the military. They say you're going to I don't think you realize quite you just signed a contract that takes an act of Congress to get out of, and if you don't fulfill it, you can go to prison or you can have a mark against your life. So you just really it's kind of like you never really, you lock yourself in. And so you have to, once you get in there and you feel that pressure, you're like, all right, there's only one road, and that's forward. I need to do well and need to make this count. And I think you just, as a civilian, you just don't understand that experience till you have it. This is a long-term contract, and it does something, it's hard and challenging, but it also makes you a much better asset even after the military, because you understand what it means to go the long haul when it's not pleasant and when it is pleasant. It's always easy to do something when it's pleasant. It's just not easy to do it when it gets unpleasant.
When you joined then, did you anticipate being part-time? That was your plan?
Yeah, well, I was going to see what opportunities were available and if it was going to be a good fit for our family. There are, with, the intelligence community, there's a lot of different things that can be done. As with the National Guard, a lot of different stuff that can be done in state. And it just kind of worked out. I think probably because I'm a different exception. I had such a good civilian job going in, and I was able to keep that civilian job. They retained that while I was in the training pipeline, and it only made my value go up there. It was a positive experience that way. So it kind of just stayed to where my civilian job was just better than the job the military was going to offer. So I hadn't really done a lot of full-time here, but depending on different jobs you have, it could have been excellent. So it stayed being a part-time job for me, other than when I was in training full-time.
And that's a pretty intense pipeline.
Yeah, the training pipeline was everything I hoped. So, going back to your question, I wanted Chinese in the contract, and that was a surprise. I didn't know how hard that course was going to be. It was really challenging, but really rewarding. I don't think most people don't realize how incredible the language school is out there. If they get a chance to go, I guess this is kind of a shout out for any of those that have a language and are thinking of going in the military, which actually Utah has an amazing base of linguists, and just the intel community's really benefited well from that. But that language school is like nothing else. So the closest school that does what we do, what they did in Monterey, is Beijing University, and it accomplishes it in 2 years, where we do it in 63 weeks there, to get to the same testing. There's native speakers that don't get a full rating on that on the DLPT, and they get soldiers to do it, and airmen. You're all at a joint base. It's a pretty neat experience. It's not what you think it's going to be from the soldier side. My wife can probably attest to it. It's a really tight-knit community of the spouses, and it's a pretty fun experience really for them. I knew basically 3 places at DLI. For the most part, I got to do a little bit of going around, but maybe it's because I was a late learner, trying to keep up with these 18-year-olds that just absorbed the language like a sponge. But I had to study a ton, and I did really, really well in the course. But I would be in my garage, I would drive to base, I would be in the classroom, and then I'd come home and I'd play with my kids, and then I'd go in the garage so that they, because it's very hard for your kids to know you need to study, and they expected a good 8 hours of class a day, and they expect, the Chinese teachers kind of bring the Chinese culture there too, which is kind of like why aren't you doing more homework at home? Like, I'm doing 2 hours a night. You're like, well, I got a family. They're like, are you serious about learning here? You're like, so it's they expect you to work, which is neat. It was really makes you learn there's 24 hours in a day, and you can use most of them. So.
How did you deal with the time management with that?
You get in a rhythm. I think that's one of the things that I kind of naturally learned from earlier in life. I've enjoyed. I've been in the martial arts for a long time, so self-discipline is something I kind of had going into the military, but it definitely helped me to stretch that. Just a challenge like that makes you go, and you get into a rhythm, and you just get your head down and you keep going. It's literally like, you can flunk out a DLI fast. They do unit tests, and basically, failing, I think there, if I remember right, is like below 80%. That's like failing, and you get like 2 or 3 of those, and you're either you hopefully get a recycle or you're just out. And so you've got to keep up with the course. So if there's how do you manage that? Basically get ahead and stay ahead. Start in the beginning fast, and then just keep staying ahead and keep going, and kind of just realize it's always chasing you. If you relax, then it's going to catch you, and you're going to fall behind, and it just gets worse from there. And motivate yourself. Time management is easy. Everybody knows what it is. It's just all about, can you motivate yourself? And I think most people think motivation is something you find, but it's more something you create. It's a skill. You have to remember the right things at the right time, and then that's ultimately what you learn when you're there.
I love that you said that. Motivation is a skill.
Yeah, it's definitely a skill.
It's not something you find.
So there's things that motivated me a lot when I was at DLI. I mean, like, so then, I don't know if they do it now. I heard they got rid of it, but if you scored high enough on the PT, which was, you had to get a 95 on each event for the Army things, which are the 2-minute push-up and 95% or whatever. So, I mean, I knew those numbers, and if you did that, you got an exemption and you didn't have to go to PT, group PT, which that's one thing I'm not going to border on complaining, but that's the huge surprise is like, I really did not like group PT. I am not a group PTer. I actually love physical fitness. I do a lot of it on my own. And so any incentives they ever gave me to if I could exempt myself out, that was highly motivating. And so I think I'd never been a big runner before that, but I maintained, a 6:30 mile for 2 miles, so a 13-minute 2 mile the whole time I was in the Army, just because it came in handy all the time with DLI, exempted me from stuff there. And then later when I went to SIGINT school, it exempted me from some of that. And so it, made me more motivated that way. That's kind of a tangent, but
Helps optimize your study time as well.
yeah. And physical fitness, yeah, I mean, it just helps you to be more alert, more just better all around.
And then, so what you were saying, you actually would study in your garage.
Yes. So
it's like removing yourself from the house so people didn't even see, like your family didn't see you there.
Yes. Yeah. Well, my wife probably understands. She's sitting next to me. She understands some of what we're talking about. But just my kids just don't understand. Like, I mean, when you say dad's got to study, you can either set yourself up for failure and end up like having to kind of get mad at your kids and say like, you got to leave me alone. And I mean,
Sam was a newborn when we went to DLI, and Jade was 2 when we moved. So telling a 2-year-old who hasn't seen her dad for 7 months, sorry, daddy has to study, he can't play right now, like that doesn't comprehend. Daddy's home, he can play. So having a detached garage was actually a blessing, because he could go out the door and go to the garage, and she doesn't see him. He's not just in the next room, and he's not hearing her.
Yeah, so I can actually concentrate.
It could give him time to concentrate. It gave her a separation. She knew when daddy was in the house, daddy could play. When daddy was in the garage, daddy was working. And it did that for our son too as he got bigger. Like, they knew when daddy's work time was and when daddy's play time was. And so it made it easier for them to know, like, this is our time with dad. And it gave him the separation too, where he didn't have to feel bad that he was missing out on time as much.
You got to compartmentalize your time a lot when you're in those kind of stressful Q courses. Like, so you get home and I just didn't dilly-dally a lot. It's like, all right, I'm going to play with my kids. Like, we would take them to the park every day, kind of just get their wiggles out and make sure you make the time you have count. You're like, we'll eat dinner together, and then after dinner, I'm going to just disappear. I'm in the garage, and they come give you a hug at the end of the night. And I mean, you have to get in a rhythm too there, because you're already burned out from studying all day. I mean, 8 hours, you're pretty much fried. So I would usually, you make the problem the answer, and I would study for a while, about 20 minutes like of doing some of the listening exercises. And when my brain starts to not be able to tell the difference of what I'm hearing, then you do like a little bit of working out, and then maybe you run inside and you play for a minute, and then you come back out. And so that's what I mean by a rhythm, because I learned early on, it's like I can just sit out here and like look at the book and get nothing out of it, or I can switch activities and make your time count elsewhere. I think one thing I've noticed, a lot of soldiers have trouble in these Q courses transitioning. What I mean is, like, they're studying, and when they're studying, it's like they want to keep doing that, and when they transition, they're doing something else, and it's like hard for them to bounce back and forth. And that was hard for me in the beginning, but as you practice it more, you get good at that.
I love that you said compartmentalize your time. And when you say that, I'm guessing that you mean what you're doing at that moment, you get your full attention to that specific task.
Yeah. Yeah, basically until you're getting what I'm going to call diminished returns. It's like I'm literally looking at the book and nothing's happening. Like I am trying to hear the sounds in the audio file, and I'm just like, it's like I'm zoning in and out every I'm not getting anything. And so that tells me, all right, I'm wasting my time here. So I need to go inside and do something else. And then what you find is better, do something else for even sometimes as short as 5 to 10 minutes. And it's like, okay, I've got my bandwidth back, change of scenery, I can come back and do this. Or I would just, do some working out. I had, kettlebells and stuff in my garage, and punching bag and things like that. You can jump rope or whatever. So I could stay fit. And I mean, you're in a pressure cooker there. It's like you got all these deadlines all over the place. You have a PT test. You have to do a PT test at, every, I can't remember how often, just to keep your exemption, which was, so it's just the routine had to be there. And if you're with a family, I mean, I'm glad my wife's here to talk a little bit. You have got to get coordinated with your family, because it just, like you've got to be able to keep up with these deadlines. And I mean, it can drive a family apart really fast. We've seen that, where you can see it bothering them, or you can, if you decide to take it on together and say, all right, this is a challenge we both accepted, and she supported me so well, like, and just with the routines and adapting to it, and you're communicating, then it actually, the problem becomes the answer there. It's like your family, instead of it being an added burden, it helps. And I don't know, hopefully it, I mean, even obviously it's hard on the spouses, but at the same time, it can bring you closer together. I don't know what your thoughts are, sweetie.
It was hard at first when we were first figuring it out, because I was like, oh, great. We're back together as a family. We're going to have time together. We're in a great place. But at the same time, it was hard because his time was enveloped. And so we had to find ways to adapt things so that we could have the family time we wanted. We could have time for him to accomplish the level of study he wanted, and to be able to graduate at the level he wanted. And so part of it as a spouse was finding ways to get over the guilt of having fun sometimes. I was lucky enough to move into the community at the same time as some veteran wives who had been at DLI before. And so they were able to teach me how to deal with the stress and how to deal with the routine. And one of the things that we learned early on from that was I didn't wait to have fun for him, because in Monterey there is so much to do and so much to see. And so I got really involved with the other spouses. We had big play dates at the park. We would go to the beach, and it was just sending the text, hey, if you're not studying and want to join us, this is where we are, Or sometimes we would just joke with them, when you get your homework done, you can come join us at the beach, things like that, where he didn't have to feel guilty because he was holding us back from having experiences that we wanted. And I didn't have to feel guilty for having the fun that I wanted to have, and feeling like I had to always be at home waiting and wondering what he wanted. It was building the balance for both of us and for our family so that we could all be fulfilled during that time, because 63 weeks is a long time.
A long time to be.
It is a really, really long time. And you will get burned out, but if you don't find the balance, if you don't find a way to communicate and work together. And building our schedule was one of the fast things that we did that saved it, because I would get burned out being mom all the time. And so for him to come home and give me even half an hour was awesome. He would just take that half an hour after work when he'd get home from class. He'd change clothes, take the kids to park, and I had half an hour of, I could just be sitting quietly. Moms always dream of having that 5 minutes to themselves, and he gave me 30 so I could.
That makes it sound really bad. It was usually like an hour.
It was usually close to an hour. Some weeks, if it was a testing week, it might be 30, but
yeah, testing weeks are hard, yeah.
But it was just building that in so that I could have a few minutes to myself and just detox so that I could keep going. And we just found ways to balance that all 63 weeks, and we made it.
When you knew that he was going to go through this training, did you have any idea that it was going to put that type of stress on your family?
We had a little idea that it was going to be stressful, but there's nothing compared to DLI that can prepare you for DLI.
I think the commander there had been through all sorts of different deployments when he was giving the speech at the graduation, and he said, I can honestly, I can look back and say graduating DLI was the hardest thing I ever did. And I can say that, it's kind of a shame that you should get a bachelor's, because I was in the Chinese program at the U, and no disrespect to the U, but I went back, and my original teacher there after I finished DLI, I started talking with them, and I said, should I finish a bachelor's here? And they're like, you're going to be absolutely wasted. You're already speaking at a level, it should be a bachelor's at least, what you get out of DLI. Because you're fluent so in just so many things that most people don't even speak there, and so it's. You get a congressional associates, but the nice thing is there's a lot of clout to saying you went through DLI. When you talk to people, they know if most of them know that it's a high level language program, but it should be a bachelor's degree coming out of there. There should be a way to do it. I think the Air Force, there's a college of the Air Force that actually gets a bachelor's somehow. I can't remember. I had some buddies that were Air Force, and they were able to pull something off that way. But
no, we have a community college of the Air Force, which works with our training, any training.
Yeah, there's some really good benefits that way.
Yeah. But it's just,
But you don't know. I mean, the recruiter sold Monterey as like part of the, like, this is why you should join. Like, it's going to be awesome. You'll just be there. It's easy. You're on the beach, like it's going to, so,
you hear
like
the waves crashing outside
yeah.
your house every morning. It's great. It's wonderful.
And a couple earthquakes,
Yeah, no, it was intense. His joke was that it was like the Hunger Games every week. Like,
Yeah, that was pretty funny in the class.
his teacher made it into the Hunger Games almost, where that's kind of the experience. Like, may the odds ever be in your favor, and who knows what rank you're going to get every week when you come out of the testing.
We all joked in the class, but basically, yeah, every unit
humor.
test, our teacher would basically like publicly announce who scored where and who would be in the A class and B and C, and eventually all of us in the class, we didn't really care as long as we were still in the program, but it was just kind of funny. That's why she says Hunger Games.
Yeah, so we learned to deal with the stress and cope with it, but there really isn't anything stress-wise that can prepare you, even as a spouse, for going into that.
Why do you think you guys came out of it as a couple stronger rather than it tearing you apart?
We maintained our humor and learned to balance life together. My sister also lived 2 hours away, so when things were getting super stressful and he was starting to feel a little guilty about not being able to devote family time, I could just say, I'm going to go visit my sister for a few days and we'll be back when your testing's done. And it kind of cut him loose. So we learned ways to gauge and balance and do things so that we could both not want to tear each other's throat out.
Yeah, I mean, it's always, I always like to say problem is the answer. That's one of the skills I've learned over my life. It's just like, the problem can either be the problem, or the very factor that can make it so hard, if you flip it around, can be the answer. It puts a strain on communication. So if you communicate well, it actually helps. If you like she just mentioned, you start to basically feel all this, like kind of study pressure. Like I want to study, but then you feel guilty, as this is a study week, I'm not gonna be able to be there. So she has the opportunity to go up and see her sister. It's like, so technically it's like, instead of it, it becomes a positive that, most people, it's like, oh, my wife's not here, that's bad, right? So it's, you have to be adaptable ultimately. Like, you have to be flexible and adaptable, and you find ways to make the sources of adversity, if you flip them, they can actually be a use. It's kind of an abstract concept. It's hard to illustrate sometimes, but it's, you do it a lot. I mean, people that are adaptable do it all the time.
What I'm hearing when you say that the problem is the answer is that when you are faced with some type of challenge or struggle, you find a way to flip it to your benefit.
Right.
Yep.
So instead of being like, it's a unit test week, so now, like, I just have to be out in the garage, I can't be there and such, we talk about like, well, I mean, it does mean that I'm not available to spend time with family, but it does mean there's a guilt-free opportunity to leave me here and go up to see your sister.
Which was an added benefit. When you're in the military, you never know where people are going to be placed, where you're going to be stationed. And one of the benefits with Monterey was it was close to my sister. So we had that opportunity of being close to her, and she doesn't have any other members of our family that live close by. She doesn't get to visit with us as often. So for 63 weeks, she had family.
Doesn't hurt that it's your favorite sister too. So
in close distance. All my sisters are my favorite.
It's like on record now.
But
just kidding.
It was nice to be able to say, you know what, my kids aren't in school. I don't have obligation to have them there. I can go up and be with my sister and spend time with her and let cousins get to know each other, me get to know my nieces and nephews, spend valuable time that's just been handed to us, gifted to us. And so finding the positives, finding those little benefits anywhere you go is what you can do to turn, negative, hard situations into the good. It made it easy for him to study. It made it easy for us to have, those relationship building time. And so we just found the good, found the things that we can make out of everything happen.
Yeah. I mean, one of the questions I remember just looking at the podcast was just skills that help like to get through, some of these things. Like there's a part of why I want to study Chinese. I've always liked Chinese philosophy and things like that. One of the principles they talk about is called Weiji, which is their word for crisis. And it literally is the characters for danger and opportunity. And kind of the principle is everything, when you look at it in and of itself, is both. It's how you relate to it that determines what it turns into for you, essentially. So, I mean, anything, you take like a comfortable lifestyle, someone gets to a place of a great comfortable lifestyle, and that can be the thing that completely destroys them because now they get complacent, they don't have motivation because they adapt to it poorly, rather than seizing the opportunity. The idea is, you're constantly in a state of having to avoid the danger and seize the opportunity, and it really doesn't matter where you go and what life situations come up, you're going to run into that same thing. And if you adapt poorly, you're going to get the danger, and you're going to miss the opportunity and get the danger. If you adapt well, you're going to seize the opportunity and miss the danger, is the idea.
What would you say to a newly enlisted member who's maybe struggling with that concept, where maybe they don't see themselves as having the capacity to really step up to that challenge?
That's a great question. So, I think back to basic training, and, I went into that, and I was, I'm 29. And so I'm in a very different state psychologically than a lot of the younger guys that were there. And there were some that were struggling. They want to quit. They want to med out. They start to look for things that way. And sometimes what helps is really to accept the inevitability of that Weiji principle. In our mind, we think there's some third option, like maybe I med out and it's fine and I get out of here. Most anybody that tried to quit in basic training, and anyone that I don't know, unless it's different now, you'll be parking the cars at graduation waiting for the next cycle. Like, you're not going to get out. It's just going to get worse.
Yes.
And so ultimately, you have to understand the door is locked behind you. You have to go forward. Like the name of your podcast, tap and move forward. It's just like there is only one direction once you're engaged in something like that. And going the other way is going to chew you up harder than just going forward, if that makes sense. And so if you realize you're locked in, you're like, I have to seize, the opportunities to avoid the dangers, and you start to do that. You're like, you also have to start looking at, look at the beginning from the end rather than the other way, right? When this is over and you look back, you'll realize this was an opportunity to do something you'll never get to do again. Like, you're not going to be in basic training again. You're not going to get a chance to be this push, to have so much external discipline helping you to develop personal discipline. Like, it's not going to happen again, really. And if it does, it's not going to be the same. And so sometimes that helps a lot, I think.
If you could go back to your newly enlisting self, what piece of advice would you give yourself?
It's a tough question. Probably the advice, when we first, got back together as a couple in Monterey, so as a 7-month pipeline, I went through, basic training, obviously. One small piece of advice: when they tell you it's relaxing Jackson at Fort Jackson, that's a lie. That's not actually, that's just to throw you off that it's going to be nice, and it's not at all. It's really a hard place to go to basic training when comparing to other people. That's just kind of a joke, but yeah, Fort Jackson, they usually try to say it's relaxing Jackson. It's not. So, but when we got back together, I would have given myself the advice of, you just need to start communicating a lot sooner. In the beginning we weren't communicating very well, so we had a lot more friction, and it wasn't until you have that sit down, like, all right, what are we doing wrong here? So just start that a lot sooner, where it's like, we've got to communicate every day and know what's going on and be ready to adapt together and kind of get on the same page. Like don't wait till it's a problem, I guess, would be one piece of advice. And then, I think most things went well. I was good about writing letters. She was really good about writing me letters. As far as my career once I got back, just to understand, I think I really did think it was going to be just 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year. And you come to realize that with the Guard, there's a lot of unpaid obligation. You essentially have the same standards that the regular Army has. You have to maintain all the same certifications. You just only get two paid days a month to do it. And so, I would have just told myself, be prepared for the fact that you're going to have to really, spend a lot of personal time. And that was a frustration, I think, over the years, of just I've got to do this for, I like, there's different, for example, physical fitness, just being able to run 2 miles and do push-ups and sit-ups is not really a good standard of fitness the way I look at it. I want to be able to lift weights and do stuff like that, but ultimately I have an obligation to maintain standards the way they want, and there's benefits for that, so I have to mix that in and just to be adjusted for that a lot sooner, and just understand that's part of the obligation and you got to do it. And so you just have to realize that this is a commitment you've made that's going to, it's not just you get through your training pipeline, you get back, even if you are an M-Day soldier that just does one weekend a month, you are still supposed to be on standard the whole time. And so if I would have I would give myself that advice: just buckle up for that, be patient with it, and go that way.
Are there any books, documentaries, or historical figures that have been influential to your life or your career?
Books, definitely. I love. Obviously, I guess getting a little bit spiritual or religious. I'm a Christian. I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So, the scriptures, really, really important. I think there's so many lessons you can draw out of that. That's another, thing that I would tell a lot of new recruits. If they have any sort of spirituality that's valuable to them, the military is a great opportunity to draw nearer to that and to draw on it. You'll be challenged a lot. You'll have a lot of opportunities to go to that faith, and so you can use that. That's one that's influenced me a lot, obviously, probably, number one. Other than that, Taoism, Chinese philosophy, one book in particular that a lot of translations for, The Art of War and the Tao Te Ching. Those both have so many lessons that can help you with psychology. Sometimes I would joke, the Army has what they call the resiliency program. And, they come up with these, I don't know, I guess psychologists or whoever comes up with it. And I'm like, we should just read the Tao Te Ching in here. Basically, this just seems like it's trying to get to say what they say, but just doesn't quite say it quite as well. Stoic, a book called Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. It's from Stoicism, is a really good book. So some of those I think have been really influential on me.
Are there habits or skills that you learned in the military that you use on the civilian side as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just trying to think of what to pin down. Certainly time management. The Army is just the military in general. I was a pretty timely person before, but you learn that, basically you have to be able to operate like a machine, and most people just don't. You have to be reliable like that. You got to hit this on time. You got to be ready for this, and everything's got to hit where it does. And I think sometimes that gets frustrating to a lot of soldiers and stuff, because they're like, well, we're not really at war. Why are we trying to do that? Well, because you can't, when the time for war has come, the time for preparation is past. And so you've got to already know how to operate with just like clockwork, and so it's that skill. And then when you go back to the civilian world and there's all this slush room, you're just like, oh yeah, your boss is like, can you hit that time deadline? And you're like, yeah, absolutely, I can hit that deadline, and because time management. And so I think time management is just, it's a kind of a cliche skill to say, but it's super valuable, and the military makes you hone that a lot. If you don't hone that, you usually end up being one of the soldiers on the bad list, that's there, and so it's, once again, Weiji, you either hone it or you don't.
I see you were the Iron Soldier competition winner.
Yeah, in Goodfellow Air Force Base, they had basically a competition for, you had to ruck a certain distance as fast as you could, and then you had to, I can't remember what else, you had to run a 2-mile right after that, and then you had to do a crawl for distance, you had to do a dummy. So it was just a bunch of events to basically see who could get it done the fastest.
And you did this on top of being there for schooling.
Yes, for schooling.
That's also a difficult school.
Yeah, that was definitely a hard school. That one was stressful. It's like with a lot of these, it's amazing. Sometimes you think it won't be that hard, and people pass all the time. But it's the simplest tasks become really hard when you really want to leave a place, and you don't get to leave the place unless you pass. You want to finish a course. And so, yeah, their qualifying tests were pretty challenging. But yeah, it was an interesting event. I didn't even plan on getting into it, honestly. I wasn't even going to participate. I was asked to, because I had a higher PT score by one of the platoon sergeants of the company. And
by asked, he means voluntold.
I got told that. Yes,
voluntold.
I was told that I would participate. No, I was asked to volunteer. So
did you spend time preparing for that?
Other than normal physical fitness, no. So they had. I would go and work out of so when I was there, I didn't have my family with me. It was only a few months. And so I kind of go into machine mode when I get there. I'm going to get done with my schooling for the day. I'm going to go hit the gym. I'm going to just work out a lot. I'm going to try to pass the time as quick as I can. It's kind of that same thing. It's because the time starts to drag, and the Weiji effect is I'm not with my family. We had just barely had our third child. And so I was kind of getting into that mode of being unhappy that I'm like, I'm down here. I'm doing this course. I can't, see them. And so it's, that energy, that feeling is either going to eat at you or you're going to put it somewhere. You can't, you have to channel your feelings, and they're either going to make a mess or you try to put it into something productive. Not to say it didn't make a mess at times, and I was still ticked off and probably just not a very pleasant person to be around. But since I was also in a leadership role and I had a class of under enlisted that I had to lead, you keep when you're a mess to yourself. You do that when you're on your own, and you process that so you're ready to be a good example when you need to be. But
that compartmentalization of time, like you were talking about.
And you take that energy to the gym and lift weights or do something with it. I mean, why not get in better shape with it? I mean, it'll eventually pass. There was great advice that was given to me in when I was in human training, the qual course before the SIGINT training, when I was just barely started out, and we were going to be given the opportunity to go home over 4th of July weekend as IET soldiers. You were going to have that opportunity, and my son had been born, my first son, and so I was really looking forward to that. And then I don't remember exactly what happened. We were allowed to see the news. It had basically nothing to do with us as IET soldiers, initial entry training soldiers, and it was just all canceled. No initial entry training soldiers throughout all of the Army could go on any leave, and it was gone. And so, I mean, obviously this is a major demoralization. I'm not happy about it. I remember, I was starting to get into that mode, and I just remember one thing that our first sergeant said there that just has stuck with me ever since. He just said, sometimes, I guess not to say anything bad about the officer. The officer, tried to make it better by saying he was going to have us do like a ruck march over the 4th of July, and he would take time with us, which didn't go over very well. We just wanted to kind of be able to be alone for the 4th of July weekend. But the first sergeant was sensitive to that, and he just stepped up and that's why all the soldiers in that company loved him. But he just said, I can't remember what he said. Soldiers, one thing when things suck, they can't stop the clock from ticking. So just drive forward. And that's something that stuck with me. Whenever something's bad, I'm just they can't stop the clock from ticking. It'll pass.
There's always an end.
Yeah, it is. One way or another.
It's what people need to keep in mind with embrace the suck.
Yeah.
It's a short-term thing.
Yep.
Although you'll probably have to do it again.
Short. It doesn't seem short. Yeah, it doesn't seem short.
There is relief.
They can't stop the clock from ticking,
So, and then on top of all of that, somewhere in there, you helped found a martial arts school.
So I was just so I've had my own martial arts school for, I've done part-time since 2007. It was Wujindao Martial Arts. I've been learning martial arts since I was 15. Started, I think, back in 1998 or 99. And then I combined, it's a pretty cool company. We're up and starting. We're just kind of an up and running company. In 2018, we started Tongwei Martial Arts. There's about 11 of us that are owners. And just all sorts of different backgrounds. You got police, you got security, you got military, you got regular civilians, but all of us have kind of been in the martial arts together for years, and people that I've trained and some I've trained with, and it's a pretty neat offering that we have to people. It's a unique martial art that you can learn. It's kind of a mixed system from a Chinese origin. You can't really get anywhere else. It's an old Chinese system. It was closed door before our teacher ran into it, and so it's got all sorts of stuff. from a lot of it's pretty weapon focused. None of it's for sport. It's all kind of how to defend yourself against weapons and to use weapons as the primary focus. Because most fights you can honestly walk away from, except some of these extreme assaults when someone's going to try to come after you with a weapon, and then there's no way to really. You have to either have the skills or not. And then on the other side that balances it out is essentially the personal mastery component, how to stay in shape. There's an amazing kind of I never thought I'd run into it, but a system of stuff that helps you to maintain longevity for a long time and things like that. Kind of the Chinese are famous for, but it's just hard to run across systematized versions of it. So, but yeah, we did that in 2018, so that was just right around the end of my contract. And so you really learn. That's one of the things I do. I'm grateful for the military experience is you learn there's 24 hours in a day. You can really use all of it. Most people are I don't have time for that. I'm you don't know what not having time is. You have time. Most people, you have plenty of time to do the things you need to do. It's just a matter of, are you motivated? Do you have that ability to do it? And sometimes you do got to pull back. You've maybe gotten into too much. But generally speaking, if you're motivated, you can get through tons of stuff in life. And why wait? It's not like it gets easier later.
That's a great point. It doesn't get easier any later. Although there is a tendency as humans for us to idolize our future selves. Our future self is the better version of us that can handle that better.
Yes.
But the truth is, going through that difficult process is what makes your future self better.
Yeah, well said. That's well said.
So I do have another question, and it's kind of a two-part question. I'm curious what from your martial arts history really helped you in the military, and then what from the military really helped you on the backside with the martial arts?
Self-discipline from the martial. So I mean, probably half of why I wanted to be in the military anyway. My kind of I grew up in kind of a rough background. Not really wanting to get into a lot of that, but a lot of substance abuse in my family and things like that. The people have had to fight, and I've kind of been an anomaly not to get into that. But I was kind of headed straight for that when I ran into the martial arts. The person that kind of taught me, his name was Tom Garriga. He was in the Marines and just had studied a lot of martial arts himself. He's been in it for 60 years still. I mean, he's in his 70s and still going strong. Like, he's a pretty incredible guy. And just kind of made me think, all right, there's just so much more I could accomplish, but all of it's self-discipline. The first thing he really started to explain was just, you're already strong enough already to do anything. It's just a matter of eliminating weaknesses or mitigating those weaknesses. And people all have that kind of potential. It's just really a matter of, making your mind up and going and doing it, making commitments. He stressed the word commitment a lot of the time. Commitment is what everyone needs for a foundation of character. And if you have commitment, you can turn your words into reality. And so so you have to obviously prioritize. You can't be committed to everything at once, right? You got to focus your attention, but those things that matter to you, if you are committed and you're focused on it, you can achieve it, right? And so that's self-discipline. From that, there's just the martial art itself. I spent a lot of my 20s doing some of that to be able to pursue that, and just because it was such an interesting system and had so much material that I was interested in, from outdoor survival to, just a very complete martial art. It was a closed door, kind of a family heirloom system for a long time. He was lucky enough to run into. He got the chance to study it when he was younger and changed his whole outlook on martial arts and such. And so it's that self-discipline you learn, from training day in and day out. It's just, you set up your own routines and you do that, and you keep yourself in shape, and you work on one skill after another, and you master this weapon, you go to the next weapon, a lot of meditation, things like that, so you can develop yourself internally. And going through that, of course, made it to where when you get into the military, they're wanting you to, ultimately, especially in the National Guard, you have to have self-discipline. Like, there's no way that despite I had excellent NCOs over me, had excellent senior NCOs who are all motivating and they want to achieve a lot, and they tell you on your drill weekend you need to do this and you need to do that, but they can't be with you the other 28 days of the month to motivate you, right? And you make a commitment that you're going to be ready, and some soldiers take that commitment more serious than others. I maintained, not really to brag, but I maintained a high level of readiness the whole time. But that's just because it was a commitment I made, right? And it's your NCOs ask you to do it, and ultimately, if a war comes, it's not like you can suddenly just, maybe I should have taken my commitment to be in shape seriously. That's the least you can do, is just be ready, because it's already going to be hard. And that was a challenging part of the time there. Even though I didn't have to deploy, didn't have to go overseas into a war zone or anything, that possibility was always very real. And when you have a family and kids, you're just, it's kind of like you have to be in a mindset where you're like, I might have to walk away from all that whenever I'm asked. And you've got to be in that mindset and keep yourself as physically and mentally ready as you can. Because if you are ever called on to do that, even as an ordinary soldier, that's what stands between other people coming into our country and taking over or not. There has to be that credible threat of ready, qualified professional soldiers that stops. That's what makes the enemy not want to come over here and not want to tangle with us. It doesn't matter how good our technology ever gets in the military, it's only as good as the people that operate the technology. And that's just the reality of it. And then, of course, how did the military help martial arts? It definitely gave me an opportunity to hone some of those self-disciplines. Discipline to me is the skill. If you can get yourself to do that, especially with self-discipline. If you're externally disciplined, that's only going to last as long as you've been in the military. I know a lot of guys that were great in basic training, and they were great when there's someone yelling at them to do things, and as soon as they get off on their own and it's their own call, they're drinking too much, they're not doing what they should, they're starting to get some of the high-risk behaviors, and the next thing you know, you're slipping off the path. And so you have to have that self-discipline. And the military tries to, they tell you have to do that. You just have to listen to it. And I think because I'd had the self-discipline before, it just reinforced it. It gave a lot of challenges to apply it and to do that.
You talked a little bit about understanding that you might have to walk away from your family to deploy, that you wouldn't be able to take them with you in that type of scenario. Is that something you talked about as a couple before you even joined the military, or did you have to come to terms with that afterward?
Yeah, we absolutely did. I mean, my wife could probably answer to that. I mean, she had to be ready for it a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd say that's probably as hard or harder on the spouses than the soldier.
Yeah, it's something that we talked about a lot before we signed. It's something we talked about all the time after he signed. It was the commitment we made, knowing that he could be asked at any time to leave and to go, and that's what we had signed on for. You know, a lot of people think, oh, well, he's signed up, he's in the military. But a lot of people forget, and some spouses forget, that when they sign, you've signed too. You are their support system, and you are what's going to get them through. And if they don't have you backing them 100%, it's going to make it that much harder on them to do their job and to not have the guilt, not have the regret, not have the pain every time they're asked to do something. So just knowing that you have to embrace the suck with them and you make the best out of it that you can together is where you've got to be. And, you know, helping our kids to understand that when daddy has to put on the uniform and go, you know,
It's got to happen. Yeah.
It's going to happen. And there's nothing, no crying, no phone calls we can make that are going to stop that, you know? And so it was just something that we had to come to terms with, you know, and it was something we were thankful every time it didn't happen, you know, when they would say it was our turn for deployment cycle and we waited and watched, you know, like, okay, is it going to be our number this time to go? Is it going to be his turn to volunteer for that? And we, you know, missed out on it. We were grateful, but we also prayed for our friends and for the families that we knew who were going through that. And so it's not just you as a couple and as a family, but then you're expanded into this military family where you do have friends who've become family who go through it too. And you develop that support system where when we've had friends who are going out, the husbands are like, okay, you need to make sure your wife's calling and checking on so-and-so, make sure they're doing okay. You know, you build that support system so that you have someone to back you up. You know, the men do, you know, find out who their wives' friends are and they know, you know, and so that they can have a backup for their wives. The wives find each other, you know, the husbands find each other. The spouses build their unit together so that you have someone to back you up. You find those senior members, those senior spouses who have been through the suck, and you say, how did you get through it? You know, this is what I'm dealing with. And they can put their arm around you and bring you along and say, you're going to make it. It's going to be okay. You know, life's going to suck today, but the sun's going to come up tomorrow and you're one day, you know, closer to being out of the suck.
Right. You get to that point where it's like, I don't want to do this anymore, but you realize that's really not even an option.
Right.
Yep.
So then it requires that you find that space inside of you that can keep going on.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. And you find the things that help you do that. You know, he had to leave with our son 6 weeks old, with our third child. We found out we were pregnant the same day that we found out that he was going to have to go to this school. And so it was kind of like, well, at least you get to be here for the birth this time. You get to meet your son. But then you're going to have to leave. And so it was kind of a hard tear to have him leave that quick after our son was born. But at the same time, we found things to do. We found ways to, you know, keep up communication, even though it was hard for him because he was in machine mode. You know, he would talk to the kids on the phone, despite the fact that he couldn't understand some of the toddler gibberish, you know.
No idea what they're saying.
It still made it easier for them, you know, and threw ourselves into things, doing different things, so that we could find joy each day, even though Dad wasn't there to show it. You know, if Kyle wasn't there, you know, they found different ways to enjoy the day and to get past, you know, Daddy's not here today.
How do you respond when people tell you thank you for your service?
That one's hard. I usually say thank you for paying for my service. You know? I mean, ultimately, yeah, it's me and everyone I know usually jokes about that, but I mean, I usually just say no, thank you. You know what I mean? Because honestly, it was way more of an ordinary career for me. I mean, like I said, I was just a National Guard soldier, but it was a great experience, and I still feel there's a lot of honor in just having been ready and, you know, made myself as available as possible that way. But I have a strong, like, I usually try to throw it back at the person. I just say, you know, you guys are the reason that we're able to operate. I mean, the military doesn't necessarily produce any gross national product or anything like that. So we exist to support what's happening in the country. You know, if there's not good citizens doing productive things, like that's the lifeblood of America. You know, I mean, as much as we you know, not to take anything away from the military, but I think we really have to remember how much citizens do for us. And just, it's a reciprocal relationship. And a lot of times I think citizens feel like, oh, I don't contribute. And they kind of, there's almost a guilt sometimes for some of them. And I really wish that none of them felt that way, because they support us. We feel supported. And it's great to know that they're behind us. But there really is there's no capability to have a military without just regular people running their jobs, paying their taxes, raising families. Like there's nothing worth defending or worth volunteering to defend without that. And so it's very reciprocal. And I think at times, of course, you know, I mean, the media, movies, it's always glorifying the military member, probably because it's more entertaining. You know, I mean, there's not a great movie that could be made about the guy that just gets up every day and goes to work 9 to 5 and raises a family. But ultimately, while that is less glorious, that's really that's the driving impetus. Just in my time there having to be, you know, in intelligence, you really have to get deep into kind of geopolitics, economics, things like that, just to know how everything ticks. And you come to realize that we have an incredible military, but the thing behind that makes the other countries so afraid is our economy. In a lot of ways, you know, we have such a strong economy. In a lot of ways, even though we're going, you know, in debt right now and stuff like that, it still is the strongest consumption-based, production-based. And it's, you know, without that power of ordinary citizens living productive lives, there's no military power. I mean, that's the difference between a lot of these other second world powers and us, is just the citizen base behind them, if that makes sense.
So Kyle, if anyone is interested in Tongwei, where would they go?
I'll just check out the website, Tongwei MAA, so that means Martial Arts Association, so tongweimaa.com. And that's a good way to go. There's a phone number on there. And on Facebook, you can look up Tongwei Martial Arts as well. We're just a local company in Sandy, Utah right now. And like I said, it's still starting out. A lot of interesting developments for people. So if you're looking for a different type of martial art, you know, if you're wanting to wear a gi and stuff like that, we don't really do that. It's much more of a kind of an informal environment. And, you know, you'll be learning some amazing skills early on, and it's a pretty well-rounded program to where you can learn. If you're more into the combative side, you can do that. If you're wanting to learn stuff about, you know, how to keep yourself fit, how to meditate, a lot of stuff on psychology. We call it philosophical training rather than philosophical study. I mean, there's so much good philosophy everywhere, but most people don't know how to train it to where you can pick and choose out of that and actually learn how to create the habits you want. And so some of that, I mean, as much as when I got into martial arts, it was all about getting into it for the fighting. I'd had a couple situations when I was pretty young that scared the pants off me, where, you know, there was just basically almost got knifed in one situation, and when I was young, and luckily nothing really evolved. And but I just remember that feeling, and so I was just all about learning about fighting when you start out. But as you go along further, you start to realize that it's the other stuff that you use day in and day out. You know, I mean, you don't get, hopefully you're not getting attacked every day. If you are, you're probably living someplace that you might want to consider moving from. But other than that, I mean, everybody has to find ways to motivate themselves every day. Everyone has to find ways to, anything that helps you with that can help you to stay in better shape. That can help you to, I mean, meditation, most people don't have any idea how to do that. You know, we have a very organized system of how to use it for productive, you know, to make yourself more productive, happier, more aware. And so, as corny as some of that sounds, that's the stuff that actually all the other successes come from that. I mean, if you lose yourself, you know, I mean, you can't really do anything else.
Well, Kyle Whiteley, thank you so much for your time and sharing your insights and the things that you learned from your military career.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me. And my wife, Anna, as well.
Yes, Anna, thank you for being here as well.
You're welcome.
And adding the perspective of the spouse. I hope you enjoyed this episode and found a new mindset to help you excel. There were so many great perspectives shared in this interview, from time management to Weiji to understanding motivation as a skill. Possibly the most important perspective Kyle talked about was learning to change the problem into the solution. Is there something in your life you find frustrating? How can you leverage that situation to improve your life and skill set? Or make an important relationship stronger, like Kyle and Anna, leveraging stressors and demands of military life to bring them together as a couple. For more information on Kyle and his martial arts school, there are links in the show notes, or you can visit www.tamfpodcast.com/TANGWEI. To share what you learned or make suggestions for future episodes, please visit the Tap and Move Forward website or social media sites.